Well, there you have it. Gloucester Crescent.
Round about 1968, Alan Bennett moved to 23 Gloucester Crescent, and not very long after, Miss Shepherd drove her van into Gloucester Crescent, parked it a little way up the crescent from Alan's house.
Well, I first moved into this house. She would have been living in the van, I think probably at the top of the street.
Seems to have settled at 66.
After about 3 months, she'd then let the van drift to the next house.
She ended up opposite Alan's house. Around about 1974, the council tried to move her on.
But the ideal solution would be off-street parking. She finally managed to winkle her way in there. Put the van in your drive? That never occurred to me.
So they essentially lived with each other for 15 years.
So I have the van and the Reliant.
Yeah, I've had guidance. That's where it should be.
If I knew it was going to be for 15 years, I'd never have dreamt of doing it. But of course, it wasn't like that. And, you know, that happens in life. You know, things creep up on you.
I moved to Camden in round about 1983. I knew that Alan lived at 23, but I could not work out what this yellow van, which was covered in bits of old carpet and had this strange system of wires running between the van and the house. I could not work out what that was. And then I later discovered that nobody ever asked him what the van was, even when it was there. The English are too polite.
Most people didn't say anything. I think it is amazing that people, you know, they just took it for granted.
Clear off! And what I can't understand with Alan, I really don't understand this, because we said, well, how? I mean, it's a long time she was there. And Alan said, well, she didn't really impinge. And I thought, well, what do you have to do to impinge on Alan?
She died when she was, I think, 78. So I then wrote an account of what had happened for the London Review of Books.
He published a memoir of it called The Lady in the Van, in which he described his experiences of the last 15 or 20 years.
I knew there would be no question of writing about her while she was there, because I didn't want people, you know, coming to look at the van or coming to look at me. So there was never any question of writing about her while she was alive.
It was in 1999 that we did the play, The Lady in the Van, in the West End with Maggie Smith as Miss Shepherd, and it ran for 9 months. It was obviously Maggie Smith in that role was what the theatre public wanted to see.
It was written for Maggie, and obviously she played it triumphantly on the London stage.
I couldn't imagine anybody doing it better. Though she used to complain that she'd never been in a play where she got more cuts and bruises because she was having to get in and out of the van in the dark.
The thing that I think brought us back to the idea of making the film was an autobiographical play that Alan wrote called Cocktail Sticks, in which Alex Jennings played Alan Bennett and played him honestly with more authority and imagination and wit than Alan, who is a very good actor himself, could now bring to the role of himself.
Well, I'd kind of grown up with him, I suppose, and his work on TV was sort of event television, so he was very much a part of my growing up.
And I think it was the fact that Alex was obviously so in command of the part of Alan Bennett, and that Maggie herself had now reached the age that Miss Shepherd was at the end of her life, that brought us back to the material.
Action!
Well, she's very understanding, social worker.
Nicholas is Alan's principal collaborator, both on the stage and now on film, and they have a very shared attention to kind of thematic detail and taste.
I had the biggest stroke of luck of my career when Richard Eyre, who was then my boss at the National Theatre, put me together with Alan to make a big children's show out of the book The Wind in the Willows.
The first thing we did was Wind in the Willows, which is nearly 25 years ago. Luckily for me, I mean, there'd never been any reason to go anywhere else.
And we got on together so well that that Alan has shown me all his stuff since, and I've directed all his stuff since. I've had a bit of a film career as well, because my film career is essentially about Alan Bennett's material.
It was a great treat doing a film with Nick, particularly of a thing that you've already done. You're left very isolated in the theatre, you know, you get abandoned by a director. Because a film is such a tight, compact unit and that you're all very close together, hours and hours and hours a day. I mean, I got to know Nick more when we were filming, and I think that was true of Nick getting to know me. It's just a great treat to have a director there.
Action!
Are you calling me a liar? I know a boa constrictor when I see one.
We wouldn't have made the film if Maggie wasn't interested in making it. I mean, that's the horrible and bald truth about it. I think if Maggie wasn't up for playing this part on screen, there would be no film.
I bought you some clothes.
Where am I supposed to put 3 coats? It's always rather strange to be playing somebody who was real. You know, we spend a lot of time in this profession making people out, but this was a real person, and she lived in that place.
But she looks so remarkable. She's been dressed in such a way that from what photographs there are of her, she's been dressed much as Miss Shepherd was.
You're not doing me a favour, you know. I have got other fish to fry.
It's such a layered performance, not only because she's familiar with the character of Miss Shepherd and has played her on the stage, but also, you know, she's had time to really think about the performance in such detail now, and so you don't get a theatrical performance now. This is a very, very layered and nuanced and detailed cinematic performance.
She said, that was arguing. And I'd never make a nun if I argued.
There's a conceit in the film that there is a writer, Alan Bennett, and an Alan Bennett who is dealing with actual life, really.
I think a lot of writers, a lot of creative people see themselves in this way, as both the person who lives the life and the person who turns the life into literature, into art.
I live, you write. That's how it works.
Yeah, except you don't much.
Don't what?
Live.
I was nervous about doing it on screen because I've done less screen work than I've done stage work. And I tried to reduce what I did on stage, I suppose. I suppose I was given confidence by the fact that Alan gave me his blessing, really.
And now, Alex, I've got a feeling he is Alan Bennett now, and vice versa. I think that Alan sometimes is Alex.
How do you talk things through with someone who has conversations with the Virgin Mary? You do not talk things through with her because you don't get through.
And this is Jenny.
Nice to see you.
The bunch of actors that Nick got together to play the other parts in the film was extraordinary.
Keen-eyed spectators of this film will find that the entire cast of the History Boys, bar Richard Griffiths, who's sadly no longer with us, do make appearances in the film. And they all came in really for one day and played all the little parts.
All right, my love? Looking especially lovely today, sweetheart?
Don't sweetheart me. I'm a sick woman. Dying, possibly.
Frankie de la Tour, who was in History Boys, has a larger part in the film as Ursula Vaughan-Williams.
Jackson Pollock himself could not have done it better.
As soon as Alan and I started to talk about The Lady in the Van again, it seemed essential to me that we should shoot it where it happened. The point about The Lady in the Van, the whole way the story is told, requires the point of view from the writer sitting at his desk in the bay window to the drive and the crescent. That's kind of the irreducible unit of the film.
When you're writing or trying to write, you know, very often it's just staring out of the window. So I would tend to stare at her.
So it was just essential that we were there at the real desk, looking through the real window at the real crescent. Alan still owns the house. He doesn't live there anymore, but he still owns it. His tenant very kindly vacated for 3 or 4 months.
It helped that we were filming in the house and the garden where it all happened enormously with one's imagination, to actually be in the room where he wrote The History Boys and the Madness of King George was amazing, amazing.
I was rather pleased with the way it looked when I lived here, although I'm sure many people thought it was very eccentric, but not as eccentric as the van. I mean, that was part of the eccentricity, I suppose.
663. Action!
The vans are a pain because we had to have a few vans that would take us from, you know, basically 1970 through to 1989. So that's a particular vintage of van. And so the ones that still survive, you know, are collector's items. So that we had to pay quite a lot of money to very, very meticulous van collectors and then trash these vehicles immediately we'd got them.
It was hideous. But that really made you think that that is what she lived through. So convincing was the van at times. You'd really think, perhaps she's there, perhaps she's in there and going to tell me something helpful. Would you like to push me up the street?
I think all the great Universal stories are universal because they're so particular. And you might say that most of this story happens on a tiny little patch of land, a tiny little drive outside a particular house in North London. But in that van is a story of irreducible human dignity. She's absolutely determined to live her life the way she wants to lead it.
It's a peculiar life. And in a kind of way, it's not wasted because Alan has used her life. So she'll be around.
The other thing that the film is about is how a writer writes.
This is what I was landed with, so you just have to play the card next to your thumb, as it were.
You don't put yourself into what you write. You find yourself there.
Alan slowly realizes that this is what he's got to write about, and he realizes in writing about her important things about himself.
Alan makes you feel unsafe in his presence, in actual fact, because you've got a feeling he's going to wait until you've turned round and he might write anything.